CTN Cable Channel 16 and online at a2gov.org/watchctn. If you'd like to speak at public comment, you can call toll-free 877-853-5247 or another of the published numbers and enter meeting ID number 940-7190-7291. And with that, we will go ahead and call the roll. Josh. Oh, we're
getting a few last minute people coming in. So before okay, we'll go ahead and get started with that. Commissioner Bush.
Present from Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Cavateo.
Present from Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Kraut. Commissioner London.
Present from Ypsilanti today.
Commissioner Marson.
I'm here in Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Montague. Commissioner Prolowski.
Present from Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Skylas.
Present in Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Smith.
Present in Ann Arbor.
Councilmember Radina.
Here in Ann Arbor.
Councilmember Watson.
Here in Ann Arbor.
Welcome all, and we have a quorum.
Terrific. Thanks everybody for joining us today. First, we have our approval of today's agenda. We have a robust agenda we have before us. Any additions or changes to the agenda before we move on? All right, seeing none, we'll start our first public comment period. We allot 3 minutes per speaker. As a reminder, PAX doesn't respond to these comments, but we very much appreciate people taking the time to call in and participate. So do we have any callers on the line this afternoon?
We possibly do. Yes, we have one caller. Let me promote them to speak.
Hi there. This is Adam Goodman. I'm speaking to you from the 5th Ward. I'm here to talk about the US 23 project and the Gallup Park pathway. I'm a frequent user of the border-to-border trail through there, both for pure recreation and also for transporting myself to and from Ypsilanti. So I took a look at the slides here, and I have to say this idea of sort of a transit detour, a bus bridge, does not strike me as reasonable or adequate. It looks like we're talking about using the existing Route 3 service, which only runs every half hour. Buses only have capacity for 2 bikes on the rack on the front. And so you could take what's normally, a 5 to 10 minute bike ride and turn it into an hour-long ordeal. I don't see myself ever doing that. I'd be surprised if we find many people who would do that. So I'd like to offer, just for your consideration, a different idea, which is that the city of Ann Arbor has it in their capital improvements plan to build a sidewalk or shared use path along Geddes on the north side of the river there, closing a really significant sidewalk gap. Now, this is, of course, a challenging project for the city to take on its own, but perhaps if the city and MDOT could join forces on this, it could actually get it done. And the beauty of this would be that, this wouldn't just be sort of temporary improvements. This would be a permanent benefit for pedestrian bike access and mobility in our community. And it would let the city kind of achieve the full benefit of that expensive pedestrian bridge built over US 23 at Geddes. Also, I think it's really important to get clarity on the timeline for this project, both what's the total length of time that we're going to see a disruption here, and if we do go with this causeway option, how long is it going to be closed, and how often, and for what period of time. What I've heard for the total length of the project is 3 years. I'd love to see confirmation of that, or if the answer is something else, I'd love to hear that. That's all. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Adam. We appreciate the comment. Do we have other callers?
We do have other callers. One moment, please.
Okay.
Hello, Bill. You've been brought into the meeting to speak. Can you hear us?
Bill Hooter, I'm with MDOT. So
Oh,
I'm just,
my apologies. Thank you.
Hi, Bill. Thanks for joining us.
Yep.
Other public commentary at this
Awesome.
time.
I am seeing some names in here I don't recognize, so let's see here. Janine, are you a public caller?
I think unless someone is raising their hands, I think we will consider no public comment. So folks, if you are here for public comment, can you please raise your hands?
It appears we do not have any more public callers. Thank you, Remy.
Absolutely.
All right, thanks, everyone. We'll move on to the approval of our minutes from our last meeting, which was on January 16th, 2024. Do we have a motion to approve or any amendments to the minutes? Rachel, motion to approve? All right. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Was that, oh, I'm sorry. I didn't see who that was. Was that Montague?
Yes.
All right, thank you. All right, very good. Any further discussion on the motion? All right, all in favor, please signal by saying aye, raising your hand.
Aye.
All opposed, say no. Great, motion carries. Thank you. We'll move on to the presentation section of our agenda, which today is quite robust. First, we will have a presentation on the MDOT US 23 bridge update that was referenced by the caller a couple minutes ago. We've got a lot to talk about today. So I believe that for this update, I've got Rob LaPaula from Colliers Engineering and Jason Pittman from Jackson TSC Cost and Scheduling, along with Barb Ahrens from Syncar Consulting. Is that correct?
That's correct.
All right,
Yes.
terrific. Well, thank you very much for joining us, all three of you. We appreciate the time, and take it away. Floor is yours.
All right. I just want to verify, can you hear me? Yep. Okay. All right. My name is Jason Pittman. I am with MDOT. I'm the project manager on the US 23 study. So I'll go through and give you just a quick update on the project here, and then Rob is going to take over and talk about more specifically the trail impacts and what we've been doing so far. So Rob, you can go to the next slide.
oh, yep, I just wanted to confirm you can see that slide.
Yes.
Is that working there?
Yep.
Okay.
So just a real quick overview of the project. We are doing a environmental assessment currently on US 23 from I-94 to M14. We're looking at several alternatives for mainline pavement, as well as some alternatives for the Washtenaw Avenue US 23 interchange. So we're going through the environmental assessment phase currently, looking at studies, and then we will transition into the design phase once our alternatives are selected. Go ahead, Rob. So just to give you an idea of project schedule, we started the project about a year ago. So we're going through several items for data collection, looking at existing condition. We've kind of wrapped that up, and now we're into our alternatives, development and analysis. We've been doing public engagement through the whole process, and we'll continue to do that. That's the main reason we're here this afternoon. So our environmental assessment process will be completed sometime early fall. And then we will go in to final design. Construction, we're anticipating right now will start in 2027. It'll be a 3-year project currently, so 27, 28, and 29. You go ahead and go to the next one, Rob. So before I hand it over to Rob, this gives you kind of a overview of the impact area we're going to be talking about related to the Gallup Park Trail, which is part of the Border to Border Trail. It's basically the section between here on Parkway and Dixboro Road. So we will talk in a little more detail about where we started in the conversation with city parks and kind of where we're going. So Rob, go ahead and take it away.
Okay, thanks, Jason. So just a little more into the specifics. With the project along 23, that's going to include replacement of the bridges that carry the freeway over the Huron River and the pathway, and there's also the Amtrak line right there. And so these bridges here in the image, those will be replaced, and there will be some new bridge piers that will replace the existing and pretty much the same spot as where the existing ones are. Just by virtue of that and the proximity of the pathway, it's unavoidable that there's going to be temporary components to the pathway. So, and just to kind of go over just a little background on the environmental review aspect of it, since federal funds were used for constructing the pathway, we have to follow federal procedures in the environmental plans process for these impacts. So like Jason mentioned, we have had some engagement efforts and coordination efforts ongoing already, and we'll be continuing those, but we've been coordinating with a variety of different impacted stakeholders here. And then we've also been exploring various construction site access plans, try and minimize the duration of the closures and any impacts to both the trail and the waterway, because that is used for recreational purposes as well. And because of the requirements, the federal requirements, there will need to be a public meeting for going specifically for these impacts here. And the public meeting could be possibly combined with, an upcoming one that, overall project one, or it might need to be a separate meeting that just is for the park and the water trail impacts. Our plan would be that it would be an in-person meeting, and then possibly to do a virtual option for people that aren't able to attend the in-person meeting. We just did something very similar when we had the public meeting earlier here in February, and then following that we did a story map type of virtual meeting. So folks that weren't able to make the in-person one were able to go online and do a self-paced review of all the information and be able to provide feedback that way as well. So there's options there that we'll look at. MDOT would, go as far as doing their public meeting, they'd do their normal press release and get the information out like that, as well as we do have a project website there as well to communicate things. But certainly there could be some other thoughts to reach the users. Perhaps, the city parks website, that could be an avenue for communicating, or if the parks department has a newsletter or email subscriptions, maybe there's some things we could discuss and how to get the word out for that, including border to border, that as well. So that's quick update on that. And then I want to just do a quick recap of an initial concept that we were looking at and that we had met with the city Parks and Rec as well as the county Parks and Rec back in November of last year to talk through this initial concept. A lot of stuff going on here in the graphic, but essentially with all the different bridge work and the impacts, one idea we had initially was to it would be a closure of the trail. We were looking at the possibility of using Old Dixboro Road and the trail itself for construction access. But that would pretty much take that stretch of the pathway out of commission there during the construction season. And as we found, there's really not currently any reasonable detour routes. I don't know, either along East Carolina River Drive or Getty's. The one possible one we looked at was Huron Parkway all the way up to Glacier Way, and that's very likely. So the other big thing there, National Park Service, that federal agency is involved because of the federal funds that were used. 6F has to go through them for the clearance. And after discussing this concept and the lengthy durations of closures, they would not view that as a de minimis or temporary impact. It would not fall under that, so it'd be more impact. So we went back to the drawing board here after that initial meeting to try and find maybe some concepts that would help to keep the pathway open as much as feasible. So what we've developed here for this concept is for doing the construction access, which is these yellow highlighted areas, from the north side for the northerly part of the bridge, but from the south side along the freeway corridor, coming over the railroad tracks to access the area where the new bridge piers will be constructed there. With this concept, it would build out some stone causeways into the river, and a temporary pathway would be constructed on the stone causeway to go around the construction area. But even with that, there are impacts or different construction operations that would require the pathway to be closed. And then I guess other hurdles that we have to go through here are that the temporary rail crossings would need to be approved by Amtrak. So we're going to work towards that process to see if that's feasible. The stone causeways, the temporary causeways out into the river, those will require Eagle permitting. So that's another thing that has to be worked through with this concept. But as far as like I mentioned, some of the temporary closures that would be required when we're doing demolition work, removing the existing bridge spans, when the new beams are being placed, you wouldn't want any pathway or water traffic going under the bridge at those points in times, as well as for when the new bridge decks are being poured. And then I guess depending on what the Eagle requirements are and the hydraulic requirements are in the river, the pathway, the stone causeway may need to be removed each winter time, or very likely would need to be removed if the water gets high, and then it would require moving the path back to its original location and putting it back out there. And I kind of glossed over a little bit on the water trail access. I should mention that with this concept, it would be maintained, open area for water trail access, and the ramp, the launch is down the way here, but that would be between the temporary causeway and there's some bridge piers out in the river. These temporary floating causeways are for the purpose of removing the existing bridge piers that are out in the river. With our proposed bridge concepts, currently we don't have proposed piers in the river, so that is one thing there that'll, at least take one thing out of the mix there. I want to go into some discussions that we had recently with the ride, this concept of a transit detour for these intermittent closures of the pathway. And as was mentioned earlier in comment, it would utilize Route 3 that's already an existing route. And from near Huron Parkway on the one end, in Dixboro in the Gettys area on the east end. And the idea would be that during those intermittent closures, users that want to go through the area would go up to be intercepted or get on transit, either eastbound or westbound, to bypass that area. So then I have a couple little more zoomed in graphics of what this would look like. So at the west end, it would route pathway users at the Park Road, where the wood bridge is there, and bring them along the pathway up to the Huron Parkway Gettys intersection. For the westbound, in this case, it would be a drop off. That would be at the transit stop there on the east side of Huron Parkway, just north of Gettys. And for the eastbound pickup, it would be a bus stop located south side of Gettys, just east of Huron Parkway. Currently, there isn't any pathway connection there, so there would need to be some improvements to make this work. And have a connection to the pathway. On the east end, for westbound pickup, it would be on the north side of Gettys, at the New Dixboro Road. And then for the eastbound users, it would be a drop off on the west side of Dixboro, just north of the river. There's a existing stop there, but again, that stop would need some improvements there. There's no bus pad. There's a sidewalk and a green space there. Sidewalk. So I think that covers the overview of the concept. Jason, do you have anything to add on?
Yeah, I guess I just wanted to reiterate that like Rob said, we did have a initial discussion with the ride back earlier in the month to look at this option. There's still a number of items that we need to work out with the ride to verify that it's a completely viable option. It was based on our meeting, it was promising, so we're going to continue to work with them on this option. And then I guess lastly, as it said, I think it was slide 5, kind of down at the bottom, because this will have to go through the 4F, 6F review. Yeah, they're down at the bottom. The city will have to provide final sign off for the 4F review, and then we'll be working with National Park Service on the 6F review for the temporary non-conforming use. So there's still several issues to work out for the maintenance of use on this path as much as we can. But there will be times where we will have to close it. So we're looking at what the best option is to get that traffic around this area here.
Well, thank you both for that presentation. Did you have more to share before we go into, I'm sure that PAC is going to have some good questions for both of you. I wanted to start with something that the caller had mentioned about the frequency of the buses coming on the Route 3. Could you speak to that? I don't know if that's something that you've yet discussed with the ride, but it sounds like if there's going to be a lot of use of this idea, they would need to increase the frequency of that travel.
Yeah, so that was one of the items we discussed with the ride, and that's something we will have to work out. If it means maybe an additional bus running, at closer intervals, that's something that we have to work out with them. But that was discussed at our meeting earlier this month.
You mentioned maybe even like a short term, so it wouldn't be a full route. It would just serve primarily just this purpose. So it could, if they could make it work, then have a short term.
Yeah, and
possibly do that, but they're looking to see if that's what it is.
Yeah, and we currently have plans this spring to go out and take some counts for users on the trail, so we can get a better idea of what volumes we're going to be looking at. So we'll be using that information as well as we kind of proceed with this option.
Well, thank you. I see Anne has a hand up, and then Rachel.
Yeah, hi, thanks for this presentation. It's very interesting. In other situations, other locations that I've been in, when a trail like this that doesn't have a ton of alternatives that are safe for pedestrians and bicycling, I've seen where there's a dedicated vehicle that's used to transport around the blockage, particularly when there's bikes involved. Like the caller said, our city buses can't actually accommodate more than about 2 or 3 bikes. And I kept seeing this problem on a trail that had a lot less traffic, and yet in the 15-20 minutes that I had to wait for a vehicle to come, there were about 5, 6, 7 bicycles waiting in that time, that piled up in that, they queued up in that time to need to be transported around the blockage. And this border to border trail gets a lot more traffic than that. And so I'm just wondering, have you considered dedicated vehicles?
I can't speak for the ride, but I think and Rob, you can correct me if I mischaracterize this from our meeting, but there was an issue with the ride setting up a specific vehicle just for this movement. It had to do with and I don't recall the ruling for their funding, but it had
charter.
Okay, it had to.
Sorry, Jason. I just thought, yeah, it was a charter. They can't be like a charter bus, so they just have to watch that. Sorry.
Yeah. So, yeah, thanks, Barb. So, that is one of the items we will have to continue to work with the ride to see what kind of options we have. They did indicate that the buses do have very limited availability for bike users. So we will continue to work with them to determine what options we have for the bike user.
Rachel, go ahead.
I wanted to surface Adam's comment because I happened to think along the same lines when I was reviewing this last night. So I understand that options are limited here, but I wonder about, I'm picturing, say, a group of people who are doing a bike ride and they're using the border to border trail. They're already coordinating people and meeting spots from where they're going to where they're ending up, all of that. And now, in addition to that, they need to coordinate bus schedules so that the biking time matches up with the busing time so that they can get over this closure. And then I'm wondering, as I'm thinking through this last night, well, how many bikes fit on a bus? What would you do if it's more than a couple of people? So I was wondering if there had been any ground truthing yet done on how many bikes could fit on a bus and what alternatives might be if it truly is only a couple of bikes at a time.
Yeah, I think, again, that's something we're gonna have to work out, in the details here as we move forward. I think we'll have a better idea of usership here in the spring when we can actually get some counts on the trail itself. And then we will work with the ride and see if we have maybe have to look at some other alternatives for handling of bikes.
As a brief follow-up, will the data that you'll be gathering also look at user type? So will you be able to gain data on whether or not it's largely single bike riders? Is it families with children riding their own bikes? Is it a lot of group bike rides?
Yeah, some of that we might, I think we can get with the type of video counts that we're going to do. But the other thing too that was brought up and that we have had some discussion around is, there's some commuter use of this as well. So trying to figure out, somehow get a handle on how many people are using it, commuter versus recreation.
Okay, thank you for that. I think one of the things that I want to highlight is to see that we're doing everything we can to make sure that we're providing options so that, especially if there were adults and children biking together, that adults and children wouldn't have to try to make choices about who's going on what bus when, especially if there's a wait in between buses. Obviously, at a young age, children might be on an adult bicycle, but after a point, they're not. And we would want to make sure that if we are asking people to wait across multiple trips, that we're doing everything we can to accommodate their needs.
And
Thank you.
Yeah, I will add that the intent would be to make the closures known through the park's website or whatever that happens to be, to let people know ahead of time when we expect to have these closures. I mean, we don't want it to be a surprise, so we want to provide that information as much as we can. So maybe that would give some users an opportunity to maybe use the trail, in other areas. So that will be part of the coordination as well that we'll have to work out.
Alexa, go ahead.
Sure, thank you. I was really curious, and I know you're early in the process and still in kind of the environmental impact part of the sequencing. But just as you're thinking about construction modalities, if there's ways to think about, do you have a longer construction process with maybe more intermittent closures, or like a more rigorous close down the whole site for really intensive construction that's maybe less access but a shorter time, and whether those might be alternatives that you could bring up in your community meetings to gauge people's assessment of whether a shorter kind of more comprehensive closure might be preferable, or a longer, more intermittent opportunity, depending on what construction modes you're utilizing to construct the bridge.
Jason, if you wanted to just kind of give I guess just to give an idea on the general sequencing of the construction, where we're at right now with the concepts is that, like Jason mentioned, 3 years of construction. The first year we're envisioning is getting things ready, basically temporary infrastructure for maintaining traffic during the main construction. So 1 year of getting it ready like that, 1 year of replacing one bridge, and then 1 year of replacing the other bridge. So it's almost it's going to be kind of a repetitive, at least, more expensive repetitive things that you're going to see year 2 and year 3. I don't know if that helps to frame, like it's kind of going to be broken down, and there'll be these sequences. Okay, then remove the existing bridge, then build the foundations for the new bridge, then erect beams and do the stuff like that. It's kind of going to flow through that sequencing. So I think the way we were looking at it is trying to in that sense, it'll become more intermittent as opposed to long term.
No, I can understand kind of that set of sequencing. I mean, I think implicit in that is privileging the maintenance of kind of highway vehicle traffic, other over modes that are using this trail, and sort of, I think is there a way to think about that balance to create some better solutions? I don't know if there's ways to, if you're tearing out the footings on one side, do more pre-work for another stage where you're disrupting this trail, but to think about it in a way of like, how do you best maintain also the traffic, not car traffic, but pedestrian traffic, bike traffic, other traffics that are also moving through this corridor.
Yeah, absolutely. I we can proceed depending on how the environmental requirements and the hydraulic requirements come out. We could be removing and replacing the temporary path many times throughout a year, and or even the permanent path, to get people essentially put them on the permanent path. You might have to rebuild the temporary, rebuild the permanent, you'll be switching them back and forth. But definitely, giving definitely a priority to maintaining that pathway traffic as much as possible.
Yeah, so basically from a high level, the stages are going to be driven by the construction of the bridge and what needs to happen for all the components of the bridge. So anytime we have work going on overhead, obviously we can't have trail users going under the bridge for safety purposes, obviously. But that, based on our initial meeting where we were proposing a real long-term closure each year, and the feedback we got, we have now reverted back to these shorter-term closures when we absolutely have to close the trail, and then getting it opened back up as much as we can through the duration of each construction season, hoping that will be a more conducive option for the users in the city.
And I appreciate that. And I wonder too if there's ways to think about traffic diversion of cars too, that maybe it's safer for the cars to go on another route, but there's such limited options for the other modes. Just something to think about.
I don't want to get too far off subject. We have looked at possible detours for one bound of 23, but due to volumes on I-94 and M14, it really becomes an issue putting additional traffic on one of the adjacent routes. So the plan, at least right now, is to maintain 2 lanes of traffic, vehicle traffic in each bound through construction.
Just one thing that I will add in from, I mean, Parks is having regular conversation with our transportation department as well. We're understanding that this is not just a Parks conversation. To your point, Alexa, I mean, looking at what do we do to ensure that pedestrians and bicyclists and non-motorized transportation is getting the same look as the motorized transportation. And so we're bringing this group here today because of the trail that's there. But I anticipate a similar presentation to the Transportation Commission or other groups to have further conversations about it, because we do need to ensure that our commuters that utilize this trailer are treated with the same type of support that the cars are being utilized from MDOT. So that we're very aware of that concern, and that's a big reason why the initial conversation that we had with MDOT was a non-starter kind of conversation. So this step is better. We'll continue to review internally and have additional feedback for MDOT as well, but wanted to get them in front of you all and start the public conversation. So.
Yeah. And I'm cognizant of time. Obviously, we've got a couple more presentations to do yet today, but I see Anne and Teresa both have their hands up. So take it away, Anne.
Yeah, I'll keep it brief. And I know it's already been stated, but I just want to emphasize once again that this trail is used by commuters, and it's along several big employers within the city, and both Ann Arbor and Ypsilanti. And so, yeah, those non-motorized commuters need to be prioritized as heavily as car traffic. Thanks.
Teresa, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just wondering if you could provide any more specifics around estimated length of the intermittent closures or frequency of them. And if not at this point, maybe share when we could expect more detail on what that would look like.
At least at this point, we're not confident of that information yet. So it's not something we're able to provide, but that information would be available once we get a little bit farther into design, so that we have a better idea of how the bridge sequencing is going to be. There's many other factors here. One that Rob had touched on had to do with the temporary crossings at the railroad. Those are not approved yet, so if Amtrak does not approve those, we have to look at some other options, which complicates the plan as well. So there's several items that we don't have good information yet. So I don't want to tell you one thing now and we find out that we were way off once we get a little farther into design.
Other questions or comments on this topic? This is it's a lot for us today, so we really appreciate you taking the time to walk through it with us. I know we'll have future conversations on this pretty regularly going forward. Also, I wanted to say we appreciate the commitment to future public discussion of some of these, whether required or not. You know, obviously this is something that a lot of people are going to care strongly about. So thanks very much for taking the time to come out today.
Yep. And if any other questions come up, Josh, he's got our emails. He can forward those over. We'll kind of work through Josh as we move forward. But feel free to provide any additional comments or questions, and then we will continue to work with the city parks as we get a little more information about our proposed work here.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. PAC, our next presentation is on pocket forests. There's been an application to establish a pocket forest at Burr Park. And we're joined by a few of the folks who made that application, Meg Delaney, and with her is Barbara Lucas, and Marta Manildi will help answer the questions that we have about it. Do we have those folks on the line?
Hi there.
I see
I'm
Meg. Hi, how are you?
yeah, good. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for joining us today.
Yeah. I will start screen
Thank you, Arbor.
sharing.
Perfect.
There we go. Okay.
All right, take
Well,
it
hi
away.
there, and thanks for the invitation to speak to you today. My name is Meg Delaney, and I'm from Ann Arbor Wild Ones, and Barbara Lucas and Marta Manildi are here as well. I don't know if you've had a chance to look at our 7-minute video. It's chock full of information on the Miyawaki method for creating pocket forests, and it features footage of many forests being planted all around the world. It's available on our website, pocketforests.org. The 6-member committee is comprised of representatives from these 3 great organizations. In addition to the 3 of us, we're fortunate to have Janine Palms, Joan Martin, and Lissa Spitz on the steering committee, which reports to and receives feedback from the organizations that we represent. Pocket forests are healthier for the planet. They were popularized by Professor Akira Miyawaki in Japan and are now established all over the world. His 2006 book, The Healing Power of Forests, the philosophy behind restoring Earth's balance with native plants, native trees, describes the process in detail. And the oldest Miyawaki forest is about 40 years old. Here's some of the design principles, or some of the principles which guide our work. Dense plantings. Pocket forests are created when native trees and shrubs are planted in dense groupings with no grass underneath. They sequester carbon faster. They have higher biodiversity, lower temperatures, and they require less maintenance than when trees are planted alone and surrounded by grass. Natives only. Native species are more resilient and are the essential source of food and shelter for insects, birds, and wildlife. Without them, food chains collapse and species disappear. Diversity rules. Native trees and shrubs of different heights form dense shade, keeping moisture in and weeds down. And plantings that contain a variety of species are more resilient in the face of drought, invasive pests, and disease. TLC in the beginning. Our project will be protected from hungry rabbits and deer by virtue of a fence. We'll mulch generously, but we'll avoid mounding around the trunks. And for the first 2 or 3 years, we'll water well. Pocket forests are healthier for trees. This mini forest is in Morton Park, Hamilton, Ontario. I like this slide because it shows the primary benefit of this methodology. Look at the trees on the left and see how they're planted individually. You can see mower marks around them. Perhaps they've been weed whipped. Perhaps the soil is compacted because of all that mowing. On the right, you see the newly planted pocket forest, and it should be able to grow without that interference and possible damage. It was important for us to include a slide from Hamilton, Ontario. They are really pushing forward with this concept. In fact, they've started a program parallel to our Washtenaw County Master Rain Gardener program. So they are encouraging, educating, empowering residents, communities in their region to start these mini forests everywhere. They're a primary model for us in this work. Pocket forests are healthier for people. Creating, maintaining, experiencing pocket forests provides opportunities for individuals to overcome ecological grief, or eco-anxiety at the worldwide loss of habitat and species. Taking direct, positive action by planting native species may mitigate some of the mental health effects of climate change. One person really can make a difference. Knowing that your efforts have a positive impact on your community and the planet is a primary driver of participation in the pocket forest movement around the world. In the course of planning this project, several schools, teachers, and students have come forward asking how they can be involved. There will be public events surrounding planting the forest. After that, measuring the growth of the plants, observing and describing the biodiversity of the forest, and sharing pocket forest methodologies with others will be ways in which community members and students can become stakeholders and advocates. This pocket forest will be comprised exclusively with native trees and shrubs. Remember that native species are better at slowing stormwater runoff, reducing erosion, and improving water quality. We'll have public events around Planting Day. Will serve as a demonstration project for community members exploring how they can replicate this model in other spaces, and will have minimal cost to the city. We're asking for approximately 25 cubic yards of compost for the forest area and 50 cubic yards of wood chips for the forest and under the apple trees during our spring site preparation. We want to pilot this project in 2024 and build on the enthusiasm and momentum for pocket forests. There's urgency for the decision on the permit so that site preparation can begin as soon as possible. Ideally, both plots would be prepped and have 6 to 7 months for the soil to cook before planting day. Right now, only 7 months till September. Volunteers, plant donors, local native plant nurseries, and others are coming forward to ask how they can be part of this exciting movement. In fact, after a detailed conversation with the Washtenaw County Conservation District, they created a new category of special tree bundles in their tree sale for people who want to create forests. Planned for spring through fall 2024, this project will create 2 fenced planted areas, 25 feet wide, east-west, and 50 feet long, north-south, separated by a 4-foot unplanted path for a total of 2,700 square feet. The area under the apple trees and between them and the new forest will be mulched, and site preparation could begin as soon as the permit is granted. Arbor Park already has lots of exciting sustainability-oriented areas. The Children's Wet Meadows, the Food Forest, the Project Grow Perennial Garden, the Spruce Hickory Grove. The Burr Park Pocket Forest will be a terrific addition to this ecosystem of sustainable projects. We've secured over 20 letters of support from neighbors who are not only enthusiastic, but some of whom are willing to provide water for the trees for the first 3 years. Allen's School is nearby, and this project could provide good learning opportunities. The total budget is right around $6,000. We've submitted 4 grant applications and have heard back from 2 of the funders. Ann Arbor Farm and Garden has awarded the project $4,200, and the Wildflower Association of Michigan has awarded $1,250. The other 2 grants are pending approval of the permit. We wanted to show you this slide from the Yakima Nation in the state of Washington. And on the left is the site before planting day. And on the right is the same site 3 years later. The Burr Park Pocket Forest has benefits for individuals, families, communities, and we look forward to collaborating with parks in initiating this model. Thanks so much for your attention to this application, and I wonder if you have any questions.
Thank you so much for that presentation. And I also enjoyed watching the video that you sent to us in advance. I think that was a very informative piece talking about this. It's an interesting idea. I am also aware that you, just to say it out loud, you did submit, you went through the city's accepted process for applying to do this activity in a public park. So the city is using metrics to evaluate that application as well, and is considering that. Can I just ask at the outset, and I see Therese has a hand up as well. What decided you on using Burr Park for this particular activity?
Well, I think a number of factors, chiefly being there's a lot of grass there, and there are other very interesting publicly supported projects, and it just seemed like a natural fit. It's easy to access, and we really want this to be a demonstration project. We want people to be able to come and look at it and think about it and measure it and click on all the links that we're going to have on our signage to information about how they can do it for themselves. And this just seemed like the right combination of the right terrain, the right visibility, the right proximity to really have an impact and make a difference.
All right, thanks. Teresa, go ahead. And I see Alexa and Vincent also have hands up.
Sure. Thank you so much for the presentation. It's very interesting. I was curious if you could speak a little bit more to, how the local residents surrounding this area were involved in coming up with the idea and planning for the proposal. I know you mentioned the school that's close by and some other, residents. Can you just give a little bit more information about that?
Sure. Some of it was direct contact, direct communication with neighbors and asking them about it. And some were on board immediately, and before we even really thought about it, they were like, well, can I write a letter? Where should I send my letter? I really support this. So it was like many of those projects in Burr Park, organic and really, really warmly embraced.
Alexa, go ahead. Oh,
Thank
sorry.
you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Meg, for the presentation. Really excited I've known some about the small forest movement. Really exciting to see you guys taking that on. You mentioned the signage, and I was curious if that's included in your budget. I'm just particularly curious thinking about, the real need to keep bunnies and other critters out of the plot early on, and sort of in year one, what does that really look like to people who might not know about or understand a small forest?
Yeah. Well, in the application, there should be some imagery for proposed signs, and we intend to use QR codes and link probably to this Pocket Forest website, as well as other information. We want people to understand what we're doing and considerations, checklists that they should go through if they want to replicate this on their own. Was that your question? Okay.
Vincent, did you have a question as well?
Yes, thanks so much. Hi, Meg. Thanks so much for your presentation. Very interesting. I think the long-term benefits are very clear, but could you talk a little bit more about the cost to maintain and sustain the pocket forest?
We expect that in those first 3 years, well, okay, this year is site prep and planting. And then we will follow up with weeding and watering. and making sure that everybody's off to a good start. And we anticipate that each year, year 3, year 4, year 5, will need a little less watering, a little less maintenance, but we know it will still be hands-on. And by virtue of the 180 members in Ann Arbor Wild Ones, the Ann Arbor chapter of Citizens Climate Lobby, and the phenomenal Children's Wet Meadow volunteers, we think that we will have the people power necessary to keep it healthy, looking good, well maintained.
Thank you, Meg.
Anne, go ahead.
Hi, thanks for this presentation. It's definitely an interesting concept. How do you judge the success of the pocket forest after it's planted?
I think we will look, we're going through the process of selecting the trees and shrubs right now. We've placed an initial order, and we're going to have that 4 height method. We know that some of those plants will make it and some will not, and that's okay. And I think the success will be measured by not only the overall health of the canopy, but also citizen interest. What kind of questions we're seeing, the community engagement that we're having, participation by schools and students and others, and whether this does become a replicable model. I think there are several ways that we can gauge not only the health of the forest itself, but how people are receiving and amplifying this message. And it looks like Marta and Barbara might be able to supply some more vocabulary here.
Yes.
I would defer to Barbara.
Well, I'll throw in something and you can fill in after. We've been in touch with Douglas Talamy. I don't know if you all are familiar with him, but he is an entomologist who's, very good at spreading the word about the benefits of native plants to our native insect ecosystem. And he's been advising us on how we're going to be able to measure the biodiversity of our forest as it grows in terms of insect, participation, on all these native plants that they depend on. And things like we're looking at, measuring the soil moisture content both before and after we do the pocket forest, because a lot of the theory is that these the long roots of the trees and shrubs will absorb stormwater, and so the whole forest should be more moist, and with the shade and the mulch and everything. And we're going to be measuring temperature, because inside and outside the forests of these, a lot of other places are doing a lot of data collection, and they're finding that the forests really reduce temperature, greatly. So we're excited about all the different ways that we're going to try to analyze, how successful these techniques are. And we're really hoping to get kids involved in all these different kind of measurements, because it'll just be, really great opportunity there. Marta, what did I miss?
If I may, nothing that I thought of. I think Meg and you together covered the answer to the question about how we hope to measure success. I have one thing I just want to add. It's not in response to a question, but we have mentioned a couple of times engaging with school children in the project, which is something that's important to us. And it is now also the case that we have received a strong expression of interest to be engaged with this project from the High Cone public housing community, working with CAN, Community Action Network. So we are expecting to be able to provide some fun and educational engagement to kids who are living at High Cone as well.
That is exciting. And are you planning for the combination of groups primarily involved to provide most of the care and maintenance for the plot over the next foreseeable future? I realize that the first 3 years are critical, but you know, probably a consistent maintenance schedule and care is going to be top of mind. So is the idea that your group would take the lead on all of that?
Right.
All right. Anne, go ahead.
Sorry, I just have one more question. I hope it's not too lengthy. I know I sit on the Environmental Commission as well as the Parks Commission, and I know in a previous meeting of the Environmental Commission, it was brought up that there are a lot of invasive species in the natural area that's very close to Ver Park, the Mary Beth Doyle Park, and trying to keep those invasives out of that park is challenging. And I'm kind of curious from, you know, like this is introducing more natural area in the same area. And I see that because Remy's here also, I'm just kind of curious of like the balance of volunteer efforts and these different natural areas that'll be very close to one another, and how to maintain them in a way that is pleasing to the public and that meets any kind of environmental goals that individuals might have, your group might have, versus what's going on in Mary Beth Doyle Park.
Meg, do you want me to take that?
Sure.
I'm Marta Manilde. I'm acting as the president of Wild Ones this year. And a concern with invasive plants is one, I mean, you love native plants, you love them because of all the ways they interact positively with life in our local environment. And invasives are a tremendous threat to that and do enormous damage. And that applies to both invasive plants and invasive animals. We have now the Ann Arbor chapter of Wild Ones has almost 200 members now, and we have dedicated leadership and we have dedicated membership, and we are committed to this project. So our expectation is that after the first 3 years, maintenance requirements will in fact be lower than we are planning for. That's the feedback from other Miyawaki experience, but we are prepared to see this through 10 years out and longer if necessary. And keeping the pocket forest free of invasive species would be just mandatory, a huge priority. It does not succeed if it's invaded with invasive species. And we know how to recognize them, and we know how to handle them. Now, extending that to other areas, I mean, one of the reasons, the more native plants that we put in the earth, the harder it is for the invasives to take over to the way they have. Usually, if you pull a bunch of invasives out of an area, the first thing you want to do is get native plants in.
Thank you very much. Are there other questions for the group before we move on to the next presentation?
Just one of the things, and thank you for being there. Remy is a part of this, and I just wanted to provide a little staff feedback on it. I mean, I think that this is a good proposal. That's why we're bringing it in front of PAC. I think it's also important that anytime that public land use is being pulled away from public use for small group decisions, no matter how valuable and good those are, there has to be a deeper conversation about that process, not just for today, but for tomorrow, for next year, and into the future, because we have a number of situations that we have had activities develop in parks that are best intentions, and then the group of individuals are no longer engaged, and that becomes parks' responsibility. So we're here because we believe that this is a good initiative and one that we're willing to look at and support. But I think that as we look at this moving forward, there's a big discussion about how do we ensure the length of this proposal. So Remy, I know you want to jump in and add a couple things, so I'll let you go from there. So
yeah, sure. I mean, all of your questions have brought out, the questions that staff had and discussed when we convened to review the application. So the presentation makes it clear there are a ton of benefits. There's already grant funding support in place. There's letters from the neighborhood. All signs indicate that this is totally a worthwhile endeavor. But as from a park system perspective, this is kind of getting back to your question. And when we look at the system level, that the park system is 164 parks, 2,200 acres, 1,400 acres of which are natural areas that are managed by the park system. And we only have the staff and volunteer resources to reasonably keep up with 400 to 600 acres within that 1,400 acres of natural area. We're not, I don't mean to conflate the two objectives of these efforts, stewarding our portfolio of natural areas and a pocket forest. But on a system level, that is how we approach it. And we think of our investments really strategically. A new playground does have a life cycle, and in 50 years, it'll need to be replaced. And will the community that so adamantly asked for the infrastructure to be brought to their park still be there to use it, value it, or will conditions have changed? So this group here tonight has all the commitment, and I fully believe that. And I believe that this pocket forest has the potential to be well maintained 5, 10, 15, 20 years into the future. It's the 50-year question that really is forefront of mind in staff's evaluation. So I think this group has done everything in their application to assuage any concern, because we don't have a crystal ball. We don't know what the future holds. We don't know who will be engaged still in 50 years. So for what this group has put together, it's about as strong a proposal as you can do. They've thought through these questions. They are building coalitions. They are building interest and making long-term plans for engagement. But other than that, we've seen other land use decisions on public land come before you all, like the food forest. And we've learned from that and some of the challenges and the opportunities that existed there, that a written agreement really is advisable between the parties, so that we set expectations for how to measure success, how to evaluate which parties are responsible for which aspect, and after a certain period of time, ultimately who has sole discretion over the future of it without reconsideration by PAC or another governing body in 50 years or 100 years, whatever that may be. So those are some of the staff's thoughts. We had no objection to the actual proposal itself, its location, its purpose, the resources going into it, and what was asked of the city to bring to the table. But bottom line is, a written agreement that details some of our responsibilities is what we need to have confidence in that longer term sustainability of it.
That is really clear and very helpful.
Remy, that is well said. As an attorney, I couldn't agree more with the utility of written agreements. Hooray for contracts. Again, thank you so much to the group for coming out and giving this lovely presentation today. Obviously, we're quite engaged with it and look forward to hearing more about it.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. I think with that,
Thank
we'll
you.
move on to our third presentation of the day, which is an update on both the market and the Gallup Bridge. And so I think we have Hillary and Adam here to talk about those respective projects. You guys have been busy lately, so thank you very much for being here. Take it away, whoever wants to go first. Thanks.
Yeah, I'll start with the Gallup Bridge. A lot has happened since the last PAC meeting, and I'm sure a lot of you have read about this. But I just wanted to provide some background and kind of how we got to this point and what we're looking at going forward, because obviously we weren't expecting this. So what happened was we just had a regular routine inspection that had to be completed as part of our normal compliance. And that inspection found that one of the two beams that support the bridge had significant cracking. And because the bridge wasn't built with redundancy, if one beam fails, the entire bridge fails. So with that, we had to close the bridge to traffic, pedestrians and vehicles. But what we found while we're kind of looking at other options was that pedestrians were still choosing to cross the bridge. So from a public safety standpoint, we made the decision to go ahead and demolish the bridge early. Sorry, I have an issue here. Someone's trying to get into my office. So we demolished the bridge earlier. It was going to be demolished as part of this project anyway. And so now what we're looking at is what are we going to do going forward? We did explore whether there was an option to repair the existing bridge, but what we found was that even if we repaired it, the likelihood that we would get sign off to even have pedestrians still on it was very low, and even vehicles. So we kind of wrote off repairing the existing bridge pretty early on. We then are looking at, could we put a temporary bridge in? Initially talking to our contractor, it sounded like it might have been an option to explore. However, once we looked into that further, we found out it might be a 2 to 3 month process to get it in, cost, upwards of $700,000. So that wasn't feasible, from a time standpoint, or financially to restore access. So one of the things we're dealing with is not only how do we get access restored as quickly as possible for park users, community members, high school students that use it to commute, but also how do we continue with our construction of the new bridge, which is very important for long-term access. And so where we're at now is we're looking at how can we accelerate construction, move it up as quickly as possible. One of the things that demolishing the bridge early on has opened up for us is it's the potential to possibly shift the location of the planned new bridge. For those that might remember, we were building the new bridge just west of the existing bridge so that, we had intended that it would remain in operation during construction. That hasn't happened, but one of the things we've been struggling with on the new bridge is that there's existing utilities there that have been more difficult to locate than we anticipated. And so that's caused some delays to the project. So what we're exploring now is, could we shift the bridge a small amount, maybe anywhere from 15 to 20 feet? Could we shift it back east, kind of in the area that's been opened up by demolition? And could we kind of straddle some of the utilities that we've been trying to avoid? So we're exploring that option currently. We're kind of doing our due diligence right now. We're hopeful that that option will be feasible, that we can accelerate construction once we remove that utility issue. But the long and the short of it is, it's probably still months away until bridge access is restored. And we know that's difficult for the community here, for students, for everyone, all the park users. So that's where we're at currently. We're kind of keeping all options open. I hope earlier and before next meeting, we'll have an update to share with you all. But we've been working really hard with all of our, our engineering teams, our contractor, to kind of leave no stone unturned. But happy to answer any questions that you all may have, because I know this is a big thing and there's a lot of concerns out there from the community.
Thanks, Hillary. Yeah, I'm sure the question of access is top of mind for everyone. It's always disappointing to hear where you think a utility is someplace and it turns out to be a couple feet to the left or missing or wherever you think, or not where it should be. So that sounds really frustrating. Thanks for letting us know about that. Do we have questions for Hillary as this process moves forward? I know you're working to identify and finalize a plan as soon as possible.
Yeah, we hope to have one in the next, couple weeks at most, I would hope.
Anne, go ahead.
Hi, thanks for the update. I was just kind of curious, what are the implications for the actual construction of the bridge if you don't have the the old bridge there? How are you going to move equipment back and forth?
Yeah, that's a great question. For those that aren't familiar, so we're blocked on the south side of the park because of the railroad there. So we're exploring a few options right now. One of them is, can we get a bigger barge in, and can that be an opportunity to get whatever construction equipment and materials we need across? Certain things like concrete and smaller materials can be pumped across the barge. We're also looking at, could we potentially get Amtrak approval to bring trucks through on a more regular basis on the south side? We did get approval early on in the project to bring a crane through because that was the best and easiest way. Obviously, there's an existing at-grade signalized pedestrian crossing, so making that feasible for vehicles might not be worthwhile, and it requires approvals from an outside agency. So those are kind of some of the options we're looking at right now. I'm thinking a barge is probably the more likely option. But we're exploring all options right now, and there'll definitely be a path forward. Just hoping it's one that can be accelerated quickly.
Rachel, go ahead.
I wanted to start by thanking all of you for your work on this, especially since it is an unexpected duplication of work already done on this. There's nothing we love more than that. Thank you for leading the way on this. My question is whether or not there has been any discussion within this department or within other departments about press plans around this. I know there has been 1 or 2 MLive articles so far, and was just wondering if there was any strategy around that.
I would say no official strategy right now. I hope once we have a plan and a revised schedule that we can share with the community, we'll provide an update to everyone. We'll be updating the website once we have news to share. So we'll be doing that, Gov Delivery, kind of our usual social media channels, but nothing more concrete than that.
Yeah, and I mean, I will add just, obviously the understanding, when we first realized that the bridge had the issue and needed to be closed couldn't be reviewed, we took a look at that and we were hopeful, finding that out on a Thursday afternoon that we needed to close immediately and get it tested. And then finding out how bad it really was. Our number one concern was safety, especially when we had people continuing to cross. Obviously, we have fences, we have a variety of different things that people choose to do anyways. And so, we made some decisions immediately to address it quickly, and put our community safety, because first. And so we'll continue to look to do that. Each time we think we have a really good idea, and Hillary's done a magical job on this. She really has. Every time we have a good idea, something else happens that allows us to not use that idea. And so it is there. I think we do have a good path forward here. Unfortunately, even the bridge downstream, the Dix Road Bridge, is not rated for construction loads. We can't get construction vehicles over there to go up the path. It's a very bad spot for us. So we'll continue to find the right solutions. We got a great team working on it, and we'll continue to keep this group updated on what's going on, as well as push it out to the public as well, so we can provide as much information as possible.
Thanks, Josh. Other questions for Hillary before we turn it over to Adam and the market? All right, thanks, Hillary. Adam, go ahead.
Yep. All right. I'm gonna share my screen real quick. I have a quick presentation run through. Can you see my screen? Okay. All right. Yeah, so I am here to talk about the market building and this nice orange-red tarp that we have along the bottom of it that's been up for the last month or so, and kind of go through what's been going on and where we see this going. So last spring, we started to notice there was a gap between the building and the sidewalk. So we had assumed that water was washing that subgrade underneath the sidewalk out, causing the sidewalk to drop. We had Hubble, Roth, and Clark, HRC, one of our engineers that we have on standing contract, come out and do an exploration of what was going on. We removed a section of the sidewalk here to take a look. And what we found was significantly worse than what we had anticipated going in. We found that the foundations of the market building here were compromised. What we found was basically that the foundation is a CMU block. When it was originally constructed in 1984, this is actually not a historic structure. A lot of people thought it was originally. This building is not yet 40. It will be here soon. Maybe not. I don't know. Anyway, the cinder block, when they built the foundation, they didn't put the grout inside of the block itself. The problem with that is that the cinder block material erodes when salt hits it. So when we were salting the roads, when we were salting sidewalks, over time, that foundation actually crumbled. When we removed a portion of that sidewalk, this wing wall actually started to move a little bit. And we had to jack it into place. And we had the structural engineer out there. The building is safe right now. What we did determine, though, is that we would have to rebuild that foundation. We got quotes for that work, and it was quite costly. It was around, I think, 180, 190,000. And we also learned that, so we need to take the market staff out of that building starting in May of 2024 this year. Operations will be continuing. We'll set up a temporary structure while we deal with this. Knowing that the foundations needed to be replaced, we had HRC do a building assessment and go through all of the systems, and they found an additional large sum of money that needed to take place to keep this building standing. There were quite a few issues that needed to be resolved. So before I kind of go on to this next step of what I'm going to talk about, I want to talk about two other things that are going to play into this. One, we have our A2 Parks ADA transition plan, which I presented on. We had Altura hired to do an assessment of all park properties, finding our ADA violations. Parks committed to around 30 million over 30 years to bring all of our properties up to ADA compliance. The farmers market site was included in that study, so we have a list of findings. It's kind of a challenging site due to grades, and we're going to be finalizing that transition plan here in spring of 2024. The other thing I want to talk about is what I'll be presenting on next, actually, which is the Parks Asset Management Plan. So just a really high level. This is a plan that's going to take a look and assess all of park assets and amenities and tell us the conditions of everything. It'll provide us the end of life for elements and identify immediate needs. The farmers market is part of this study. We have that market building already assessed by HRC, but this new asset management plan will take a look at the site as a whole, including the sheds and everything. So with those park plans in mind, and coming up and knowing the expense we had with the market building, we wanted to take an approach and do a full market study. So it's kind of a unique opportunity to look at the farmers market as a whole and determine the needs and wants of the vendors and the public out here. And we just want to look towards the future. I mean, it's an amazing amenity we have out there, and we want it to continue to be amazing and look forward to what that would take. So this market study, we'd want to engage with vendors about how their operations work, what needs, what desires do they need to continue doing what they're doing. Also talking to the public about their experiences and what we'd like to see with a farmers market improvement as a city. So to do that, what we would like to do is put out an RFP for a full market assessment. What the timeline of that looks like right now. So on February 15th, I presented to the Public Market Advisory Committee, or PMAC, about this. They were incredibly excited. This is something they've wanted for a long time. And just due to
needing to replace that building and several other ADA issues and having this assessment done, now is like kind of the perfect time to take a look holistically at the market. What we'd like to do is in March, develop an RFP and publish it. And then April, May, consultant selection. And then this summer, really begin our analysis and a strong engagement for the market study. We realize this is a really big project and is going to be important for the city, and we expect quite a bit of involvement. Fall of this year, continuing our engagement and starting to look at the results of what we're hearing. Winter, starting to finalize that market study plan. And then spring, summer of next year, we start looking at actually like what does a new building for the office looks like, or the staff out there look like. Start developing those plans, and then possibly starting construction winter of 25. So it's going to be a long process. We know it's going to disrupt a lot of operations. We've already started having discussions with vendors and the market staff about what this is going to look like. We do have a steering committee, so it'll be myself, Stephanie Stauffer, our market manager, Remy Long, our deputy park manager, Josh. We have Jeb Bogue, who is the daily vendor market representative, and he works at both the artisan market and the farmers market, so he's kind of in tune with those needs. And we kind of see this group being responsible for developing the RFP, working for the consultant selection, and just kind of leading the charge on this effort. So next page. So with that, I know it's kind of a quick update on it and just introducing this, but I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have. Let me stop sharing.
Thanks so much, Adam. It's, you know, at once kind of disconcerting to see that this building is having so many problems, but as you say, it presents rather a unique opportunity. I'm glad to see that this was sort of thoroughly discussed with the Public Market Commission, and they're so excited about it. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Anybody have any questions for Adam? Anne, go ahead. Oh,
Anne, I can't hear you.
Yeah, we're having trouble hearing you. Oh, try again one more time. Yeah, we can't hear you for some reason.
Try.
Yep.
There we go. We got you now.
Nope.
Nope. Now we heard you for a minute back there.
Never mind then. Sorry.
Oh, now
There you are. There you go. It's working.
Now it's working. Okay. Oh, well, now she's muted herself. It was finally working, but all right. Also, you could feel free to share some thoughts in the chat if you want to do that. Or a Q&A. Alexa, go ahead. Maybe we'll try Anne again.
No, thanks, Adam, for the update. It feels like, man, everything's just turning out maybe not quite how we hoped. You know, I do think what could be maybe a silver lining in rethinking the building, and I think the study is a really smart move, is, you know, I'm sure this wasn't exactly in the capital plan in this order, but to think about, especially given the solar out there, if there might be, you know, sources through Inflation Reduction Act or otherwise that could help subsidize a new building in a way that if you could explore, you know, how that could benefit the structure, how it aligns with other programmatic opportunities out there, it could be an interesting opportunity to explore if there are other ways that might help fund some of that project.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And you know, throughout this process, we did have a solar project planned for that market, and so we have been talking with OSI about that. But I think you're right. I think it's finding those opportunities that can kind of help fund this, and what can we do. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Anne, do you want to give it a go one more time? We did hear you for a minute back there.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was really more of a comment that I think this is like a recurring theme with West Park and the Gallup Park Bridge and now the market building that and the problems that we've seen with the facilities at Vets Park as well, that you know, there's a lot of infrastructure needs here in the park system in order to maintain what we have, like, and then hopefully improve upon it. Who knows?
Definitely. And you know, all of those things, and I'll get into that in this next presentation, but they're unplanned. Like there are things that we don't see coming, and that's always hard to react to that. So yeah.
Other questions for Adam on this topic? All right, thanks, Adam, for the update on that. I appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
We'll come back to you in just a minute here, I think. But in the meantime, we'll move on to section 7 of our agenda and to Josh with the park manager's update.
Just because I know that we have a topic coming up that is very, very important with the asset management plan.
Uh-oh. All right, is Josh frozen for everyone or just me? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. We may need to come back to Josh in a moment, see if he is able to unfreeze here. Well, technology is not our friend today. Okay. Let's do a couple. Oh, wait, he's rejoining. Hey, Josh. You're muted. Can you try one more time?
Yep.
There you go.
Sorry, yeah, I was just kicked out. I'm gonna forego my update because there's some other things that are probably more pressing. I'll send something out to the group with some of the slide updates, but in the interest of time. So thank you.
All right. Thanks, Josh. We'll do a quick round robin of the committees. Anne, was there anything from the environmental committee?
The Environmental Commission met last week. Nothing particularly pertinent to parks, though.
All right, thank you. And was there a meeting of RAC, or they're meeting next month? Is that right?
That's correct. Nothing to report on other than registration is open for spring rec and ed activities if you're interested.
All right, awesome. Thanks, Anna. All right, we'll move on at this point to new business. We have before us the aforementioned very important resolution. This is one to recommend approval of a professional service agreement with OHM Advisors to provide that asset management plan that Adam and Josh were both referencing. As you can see, it's a hefty contract, $729,104 altogether. But it is for extremely comprehensive work. Adam, do you want to take the lead on taking us through that?
Yep. Let me share my screen here. Thank you. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So what I'll be talking about is the asset management plan, which is an incredibly important plan for the future of the Parks Department. And I'm going to start by just going after some of the projects that we've already mentioned that have come up. Park planning has become really reactionary the last few years. We've had the bandshell, which is $2.5 million. We've had the farmers market, which $300,000 to $400,000 for that market building. We've been spending money at Vets Memorial Ice Arena due to flooding, around $500,000 last year. The Gallup Park Bridge, which I mean, we got lucky with doing this design and putting in a new bridge while this one was inspected and had to be taken down, but that additional charge was $300,000. And not just financially, we have staff resources. So when we're reacting to something like this, it's hard to kind of catch up on the projects that we were planned for. And it's not a great way to be able to plan our resources moving forward for the park system. So what is an asset management plan? It's really a plan to help us get ahead of these issues, know what's coming down the pipeline, allow us to be more proactive. It's an assessment of all park assets and amenities to look at the current condition, the project, the end of life date of whatever these assets are, the estimated cost of replacement. It's a model that it will help us prioritize park projects, looking at park needs, level of service, equity, where we're spending our resources throughout the park system. And it'll help us identify funding gaps and needs. What we need to look for. Are we looking for grants? How much money are we short for what we want to provide on this? It's not a static document. It's a live model that we can get in and manipulate and take a look at and adjust, and it allows us to really prioritize what we're going to be working on, or what we should be working on. So we put out a request for proposal 2367. It was released on November 17th last year, with proposals due December 12th, 2023. We had one firm submit a proposal, OHM Advisors. They submitted the only proposal we had in response to that. So city staff reviewed the proposal. We interviewed with OHM and their team, and we were able to kind of ask the pertinent questions regarding this project. So after discussing the project, the staff here, we felt that OHM would be able to successfully complete the park's asset management plan. They had experience doing this kind of thing before. We were really impressed with their proposal, which was attached to the draft contract that we sent out. So if you want to review that, it does do a really good job describing in depth everything that we'll be doing. To this point, we had discussions with OHM about our inventory of assets to be looked at, and I'll go over that in a little bit. What we need them to look at, what we want them, what's going to make it successful. And then, the fee proposal was $729,104. Quite a large investment, but we believe that it's a necessity to move forward as a park system. So I want to get a little bit more specific about what we'll be doing in this. So the first task is an asset inventory. And that's just cataloging what we know we have. Right now, we have several different Excel files. We have different things kind of scattered throughout the department that we're always trying to piece together. When was something last looked at? When does something need to be replaced? And it's kind of an anecdotal in some cases. It's not really scientific or documented. It's kind of all over the place. So task one is just understanding what we have. Task two, and this is the breadth of it, is the condition assessment. So the team will go and look at everything. They'll go into our buildings and look at our HVAC systems, our plumbing. They'll even get down to what is the quality of the sinks. When do those need to be replaced? So they get to a really finite detail. Everything that could cost money from a capital standpoint to replace, that's what's going to be looked at. Task three is, once that assessment's done, we're going to start looking at the remaining life of the assets. So how long does this building have before it needs to be replaced? What about this playground, this path? When are those going to hit a point that they need to be looked at or replaced? The next is analyzing the life cycle and replacement costs. So what is it going to take to replace that building, that shelter? How much is that going to take resource standpoint? Task 5 is an interesting one. It's determining the target levels of service for the asset systems. So for the park system, how is the community using it? What are their expectations? What are our expectations when we have a structure out there of how well it's used or maintained or what condition it is? This goes into helping with the prioritization. The next step is determining the target levels. Determine the criticality of the system's assets or the risk of failure, which is like twofold. It's when do we think something will fail and what are the consequences of that? So thinking of the Gallup Park Bridge, we would be able to know, okay, that's going to start failing at this time. If it comes down, what are the impacts of that? And how do we move about planning for another project to replace it? Task 7 is looking at our O&M program, so our operations and maintenance. So what can we do for preventative maintenance that maybe extends the life? What are we doing now versus what could we be doing? Or are there changes we can make now to extend that life? Task 8 is establishing a sustainable funding strategy. That's taking a look at what resources we have, how are we spending them, what's going to provide that level of service that we targeted, and what's that going to cost. It's going to take a look at what kind of grants might be out there, what can we start to really plan for. Task 9, that's a documentation of what we've done. This is a live model. It's not a static document, but this task will be something that we can share with the public that shows what those needs are coming up. What are people going to learn from doing this? It's kind of it would be like a snapshot in time of when this was taken. So that's kind of an important thing to be able to put outward facing. Task 10 is public engagement. So we do want the public involved in it. There are users of our spaces. What we're thinking right now is we're going to do our assessment and then being able to engage with the community to let them know what shape these things are in. Does that feel right? And also just to kind of put it out there that we are doing this asset. It is a large park system. We have a lot of expenses coming up. Task 11 is asset management software selection and implementation. There are several software platforms out there, and the city does use some currently with Public Works, but what model gives us, or what software gives us the most useful tool coming out of this? There are several options, and so we want to select something that can be used, and it will be used throughout this process. And kind of leading into task 12, and I think one of the most important aspects is software training for staff. So when we were kind of looking at precedents, one thing that kind of came up is where these asset management failed for other places is that the tool wasn't regularly used by enough people in the organization. We want this to become a regular part of our planning needs. So constantly being in this model and being a facility people can go in and look at it, the supervisors, to understand maybe what's coming up for them. I think it's really important that as park staff, we're kind of all in this model, knowing what's coming up together. So just want to touch on this briefly, but the inventory of what we're looking at. So we'll be looking at all of our park buildings. We'll be looking at our paths, our maintained paths, sidewalks, nature trails, boardwalks. We'll be looking at cart paths for the golf courses. We'll be looking at all of our structures, our sheds, our shelters, our restrooms, our toilets. We'll be looking at our athletic fields, our courts, our parking lots. We'll be looking at kind of unique things like the Cascades. So what comes up with that, the skate park, boat ramp, disc golf courses, all of our playgrounds. And then we're even getting down further into our site furnishings. So our grills, our benches, our bike racks, our drinking fountains, different monuments and sculptures we have, park signage and wayfinding, picnic tables. I mean, these seem like very small items, but they do add up. And they take time. And so it's nice to know what we have coming down the pipeline, even if it's a small project. And we know we have to redo X amount of benches over the next year to kind of maintain a good level of service. So the schedule of when this is our proposed schedule right now, working with OHM. The asset inventory could be starting in March or April. And then it would be carrying throughout this summer, fall, winter, and we would hope to be wrapping up by August of next year, which could kind of give us a good picture when we're done with that of what does the funding look like to keep moving forward so that we can start sharing out that number. This is going to be a long process. It's going to be very involved. We have a large team. It's going to touch on everyone in parks. So it's something that is going to involve all of us. And like I said, it's really important for the future of the park system to know what's coming down so we're not constantly reacting. So just to recap, we're responding to several large unplanned for projects. This asset management plan will allow us to get a better understanding of the condition of the park system, becoming more proactive, planning ahead for major upcoming expenses. We put out the RFP. It was published by Parks in November 2023. We had OHM submit the only proposal for the project, but we believe that they're a really good fit and can help us successfully complete the project. We're anticipated of starting in 2024 spring and finishing by September 2025. The fee proposal for it was $729,104. And we're asking for a 10% contingency, so $72,000, to cover costs that might come up. For instance, they base this fee proposal off the data we knew, but what don't we know? This can kind of help cover that. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. I know it's a large project, but happy to be here. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Adam. It is indeed a large project, but I think, we've seen what can happen with issues of deferred maintenance, even in the last year or two. Hannah, go ahead.
Thanks, Adam. I think this is a great idea. And I've had to do these before. And what I've noticed is that they're only good if you keep them updated, like you mentioned. So my question is, I know in the written proposal, you guys included $100,000 for software. Is that, I know you guys haven't picked one out necessarily, but is that a one-time cost, or is it more of a subscription that you're paying forward for the next, 10 years or whatever?
Yeah, that cost, so that 100,000 that we put in the RFP was just, so if we had multiple different vendors come, that was kind of a cost that we could compare apples to apples. So that was it. The actual software cost would likely be a subscription. Right now, Public Works uses one, and we talked with that group, so we kind of have an idea of how that one might work. Maybe we tie into other groups, but also it might not be the best for parks. So that's something that we have to think about, and it's an important part of the software selection is what that costs. And we also want it to be easy enough to use for staff, so it's not so intense that you're not going to use it, because like you said, this has to be used regularly and not set on a shelf or forgotten about. Otherwise you're starting over. So I think that's an important part of this.
Yeah, the other part with software is there's always just, no matter what software we go with, there's going to be an upfront cost that's going to be much more significant than the ongoing costs. So having that number there is why that was put in there. We anticipate this being a long-term understanding. And if we get the right data into a system, no matter what we do in the future, that data is there and we can use it more appropriately. So,
Alexa, go ahead.
Thanks, Adam. Along the same line as Hannah's question, just curious how you guys are thinking about sort of how live the model is, right? In terms of, I've seen asset management software where you can go out in the field and call up an asset and be like, oh, there's 5 work orders on it. Are you guys imagining it's something you also use on the maintenance side, or is it really more for asset tracking system-wide?
Yeah, so that's a really important question and one we need to get into. There was a desire, and we put it in the RFP, that we use CityWorks for our park maintenance and operations. And so being able to talk between the two, I think, is an important aspect. We also do want that, what we've envisioned in talking to other groups too, is there's barcodes that might be put on a play structure, and then we can go scan that and pull up that information. So yeah, we haven't quite figured that out, but it is an important aspect to be able to have the maintenance and the asset kind of work together, which is also why we're including that operations and maintenance task in there, to really start that talking and dialogue, because I don't think the two ways can operate independently. I think it all has to be one to be successful.
Tisha, I saw you had a question. Are you?
Well, I was just wondering about the tracking as well, and then the training. How often is there a production? I know there's sometimes 2 different versions of a software. Is there when you all finally make the selection for the software, is there a way to, and excuse me, I'm getting over COVID right now, so Um, is there a way for you all to have like a non-live system that, folks can kind of dive in their different areas of the software to be able to kind of toy around with it and look at it to get familiar with it before the training. I remember I did that at Washington. It was so helpful to be able to kind of look at it a little bit and see kind of what was specific for me. So I don't know if there's a way to do that.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's a really important part and a big part of the software selection. I know I just sat on a group, we did one for a community engagement software, and we were given like a offline, like you're saying, version of that we could play with and then come back and ask questions. I know one of the software companies has already reached out about it and given us a link to be able to get in there and play with that a little bit. And I think they had a model populated from somewhere else. I haven't gotten into that yet because I kind of wanted to be even as we go through with the other software. OHM's done this a lot, and so they have some expertise in it and can kind of talk us through it as well. But I think that's a great idea, allowing staff to kind of get in and test run it before we select.
Yeah, and as Adam mentioned, his team, sorry, just one more time, and we'll have individuals from our IT department, we'll have from our finance department, from our our city works department. I mean, we're engaging every part of the city that we can because of the significance of this project to ensure that we're getting all the right questions asked and getting that information together. So
Awesome. Thank you. And then I had one more question. So how many other projects have they worked on similar to this? And is there a reason why is their Livonia office a lot more specific to this type of project versus like their Ann Arbor office?
As to the amount, I can't remember offhand. I know they have a section that deals specifically with these asset management plans, and they work with a consultant, I should have mentioned this earlier, called Alpha Building Strategies. And that company only does asset management plan for structures and buildings. So OHM can bring that in. OHM's actually relying on several of their offices to complete this. So we have some in their Livonia office. I think there's some out of the Detroit office. They're able to kind of bring in expertises from their different offices to come together. And they're quite large, and we've used them for other projects before. And so we do rely on their expertise from different offices. So yeah, I can't remember how many they did, but I could get that number and send to you.
Thank you.
I just want to editorialize, I guess is the best way for me to say this, is that there's a lot of contracts that come before this group, and there's a lot of things that Adam and Hillary and people do for the future of our Parks Department. I don't know that there are any that are more important to this. The city of Ann Arbor has been fortunate over its park history to have a level of service and a level of amenities that we have in the park system that we do. We need to figure out how do we know what we have to pay for in the coming years? What is that impact going to be on our level of service? And what do we have to do in order to fund that? As we've talked about, the ADA study is roughly 30 million over the next 30 years. I anticipate this study will dwarf that amount, or will far exceed that amount. And how do we do it? I mean, currently our millage pays it has about $2 million per year for capital projects. So I think that it is a big project for us to know exactly what those things are coming and how do we move forward with it. Because we are fortunate with the Gallup Bridge that we were at least starting that process. This study is going to give us the section of the dartboard to throw at. I want us to be understanding that this is not going to solve the service projects or service experience issues, but it just will help us. And so it is a big task that having that data is going to be extremely important too. So please, if there's any questions, let us know and go from there.
Thanks very much, Josh. I think that is well said, well explained. Are there other questions or perhaps a motion on the resolution? Rachel, is that a motion? All right, Rachel has moved to approve the resolution. Is there a second? Anne, I think I saw your hand first. Any further discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor signal by saying aye or raising your hand.
Aye.
All opposed, say no. All right, motion carries. Thank you very much. Appreciate
Thank you.
attention to this. The last pair of items on our agenda this evening is our own policy agenda items that you've received in the form of a memo, ostensibly from me, to each of you, setting out the goals that we've had based on the PROS plan a year ago, and also a document that lays out the PROS goals. Josh, do we need to move the resolution on technically the memo is in the form of a resolution, which so I wasn't sure.
I would go ahead and move it as that way. I think it's written that way. This is kind of a continuation. I think it just is a reaffirming what our goals are from year to year. I think it helps council understanding that and a reminder for us. So we're fortunate to have a nice set of PROS goals that get us every 5 years to kind of reiterate. But I think that doing a quick vote would probably be the best way to go forward.
All right, thank you very much. Hearing that, are there any questions on either of those two documents or a motion to approve the resolution? Oh, I'm going to give it to Vincent this time. All right, Vincent has moved to approve the resolution. Is there a second? All right, Rachel, I got you that time. Thank you very much. Any further discussion on the policy agenda items? Hearing none, all in favor of accepting the resolution, please signal by saying aye or raising your hand. All opposed, say no. All right, thank you. The motion carries. I think we've made it now through most of our agenda. We have now arrived at our second public comment time. Are there any callers on the phone?
We have no callers for public commentary. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Having said that, communications are in your packet and there have been many. I want to thank staff for the time and attention in preparing us for this meeting. This was a big one. And thank you all for devoting the time to be with us for the full 2 hours today. We really appreciate it. And having said that, we stand adjourned. Thanks, everyone.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you.